Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Coming at you this Monday night. If you're watching live, yes, 8:30, not 10:20 like I put for whatever reason. I don't know. I didn't even change it. There were some comments about a late night Gators Breakdown. This is a mistake I made. I was in such a hurry trying to get all this, trying to follow each and every little storyline you could possibly follow with this Lane Kiffin triangle, I guess we'll call it, Will Miles, Florida, LSU, Ole Miss. There was a lot of talk over the weekend. What kind of news will we get? Well, Monday kind of just seemed to be the day of the news coming out that LSU is going to enter the mix. LSU has now entered the chat, Will Miles, of the Lane Kiffin sweepstakes in earnest. Now, if you've listened to Gators Breakdown, I've made sure to say, hey, LSU is not going to go down without a fight. They decide to ramp it up after they get their ducks in order a little bit. LSU Ole Miss hits a bye week after beating Florida last week, and a bye week before the Egg Bowl. We'll get into all of their storylines of some ultimatums, some timelines here with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, we got people tracking house buying out there in Gainesville, Will. It's all kind of crazy right here with Lane Kiffin. So, man, you and I have generally talked about the coaching search and all that stuff. I don't think we have not went as far as we are going to go tonight with the Lane Kiffin saga, but there's just so many angles to it all. I've been on Twitter about it. I saw you today on Twitter about it, discussing it. There's just storyline galore. It is the biggest story, of course, in Gator Nation, but it's the biggest story in college football right now.
Well, I mean, that's why it seems so dirty, because it's a triangle, right? You got LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida all go after the same guy, and somebody's going to be left at the altar, unless somehow Lane Kiffin figures out how to be the first guy ever to coach two programs at the same time, which, hey, don't put it past him. I think I wrote about this earlier this week coming into the Ole Miss game. I was just like, this is really what college football executives have wrought, where the 2026 season starts, or the 2026 offseason starts before the 2025 season ends. And so I don't blame Florida fans for wearing the Lane come to our school t-shirts, though that is a little bit lame in some respects. I don't blame Jimmy Sexton for trying to bleed like every last dollar out of this entire thing, and I don't blame Lane Kiffin for behaving the way he's behaving. Right? I think there are some Ole Miss folks who are going to be upset with how much he's enjoying it, and there are going to be some Florida or LSU folks who are ticked off about how much he's enjoying it, assuming that he doesn't go to those schools. But college football coaches, high-level executives, I've been saying this for weeks, have gigantic egos. And if anybody ever had any questions about the size of Lane Kiffin's ego, it has been answered by the last couple of weeks, and really the last few months, as he's like tweeted out "spot the ball" with a hashtag, as he has never shied away from making it clear that he's a mercenary, and that's sort of the way most college football coaches are. And so I don't know why people are surprised by this. I don't know why Ole Miss fans are surprised by this. And quite honestly, this is sort of the cost of winning at a program like Ole Miss, right? You end up with Houston Nutt.
That's what he has said.
Well, I mean, you end up with Houston Nutt and Ed Orgeron as your head coach, and David Cutcliffe as your head coaches, when you don't go get someone who has some baggage. And Lane Kiffin has some baggage. And, is it a good look to have his wife flying to all these places ahead of time, allegedly? Maybe not. But I sort of look at it as, I try to put it through the framework of my own life. And if there was a company offering me 50% above what I'm making right now, like, my family has to be happy with it. Like, my kids have to be okay with the decision. Like, I might turn it down based on like life choices and, just general preferences and stuff like that. But I'm exploring the damn thing. And so the idea that anyone's not going to take time to think about it. Now, the problem I have with this is with college football and the way college football is set up. I would love it if Lane Kiffin had a week after the national championship game to decide what he wanted to do, and then it didn't harm his ability to build the next program. But that's not the way college football works. It used to be you had to get rid of the guy after the last game of the year. And that gave you time to hire the new guy before the bowl game. The bowl games really didn't matter anyway, other than the BCS. And nobody in a top 4 program or in the BCS championship was going to leave, right? Because only the elite of the elite got there. But now that we got SMU in the college football playoff, now that we've got 2-loss SEC teams arguing about who's better than Notre Dame, now that we've got Miami holding on for dear life against its ACC opponents to try to get in, like, you're gonna get.
We have USF and North Texas and Memphis all fighting.
Yeah, I mean, you've now got programs where the coaches are going to look to take steps up, and Ole Miss is one of those. I'm sorry, they are. And I know the Ole Miss fans haven't liked hearing it over the past few months. Quite honestly, as a college football fan who enjoyed Bobby Bowden building something, my whole family's from Blacksburg, enjoyed watching Frank Beamer build something. Like, there is something to the pageantry of having the coach who is yours and watching him build your program and having him be a part of the community. And Florida's had that when it comes to Steve Spurrier as well. There is something to that, but that's not the way college football works anymore. And we've been sitting here going adapt or die now for, three, 4 or 5 years at this point, and really during the entire Billy Napier era, as we watched Napier not adapt and watched him at least employment wise die. And the reality of college football is you have to adapt or die. And Ole Miss has, I'm not sure what else they could have done, but I think that's sort of the overall story, right? Is even being in the SEC isn't enough to protect you from the true blue bloods. And whether it's Florida, whether it's LSU, or even whether he decides to go back to Ole Miss and try to mend fences, it sure is interesting.
Yeah. I brought this up. My good friend Neil Blackman, he posted on Twitter Sunday about, kind of like this, the timeline and when dominoes will start falling into place and all that. And I said, look, somebody's going to be the first. It might be Lane Kiffin. It might be somebody down the road. But this is what college football has given us. There's going to be a coach that, because of this calendar, not every coach out there that makes the playoff is going to wait. This is the nature of the beast right now. And especially – these, as you said, the lower tier programs, maybe he could stay and build Ole Miss into something special. It has been a special few years there at Ole Miss, but somebody's going to be the first one. And all this talk about how could they do this to their players and their team, they got to let them know. And well, you know what? There was a bye week right here at this time. I'm sure there is a lot going on. We'll get into it, but that was part of the plan. There's a bye week. It's a lot easier to figure these things out. It's easier for Ole Miss to figure some things out now with this bye week and all that. So, Will, I want to get to it and kind of what you were responding to today, but we'll get into some comments as well. But everybody hit that like button and subscribe right here on Gators Breakdown. But that like button really, really helps us out right here on the YouTube version. Subscribe right here on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform as well. And look, there's been a ton of new Gators Breakdown Plus members in the last few days, especially today. Probably one of the biggest days I've had in quite some time. With new members there for Gators Breakdown Plus. So everybody, thanks. I hope you enjoy it. If you're not, gatorsbreakdownplus.com. You get ad-free episodes of Gators Breakdown. The Discord chat, I'm telling you, it's just nuts right now. So a lot of good info there, a lot of good discussion there on this coaching search right here with Lane Kiffin and the saga. And hey, look, maybe this is where it ends. Maybe this is not where it ends. We'll keep the conversation right there going. With this right there on the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord. Access one more time, gatorsbreakdownplus.com, starting at $3 a month. You can't beat the deal for what you get there at Gators Breakdown Plus. So how it come from your angle, it was Aaron Torres, or Torres, I think that's how he says it. He said, Lane Kiffin has taken the greatest regular season in Ole Miss history and turned it into a circus. In a season where Mike Elko, Kurt Cignetti, Matt Rule have signed extensions, he owes it to the school and their fans to give them clarification on his future. This is embarrassing. It is I completely agree with you, Will. He probably would have been fined, except for the whole "this is embarrassing" part of it. There's a lot to agree with him right there on, except for "this is embarrassing." And as you said, this isn't Kiffin's fault. College football powers that be have set up a system that requires decisions to be made before the season is over. Elko, Cignetti, etc., all made decisions too. They just happen to be decisions you agree with. And that goes back to this whole conversation I had a couple of weeks ago where it just this whole narrative here. Now LSU is in the mix, so will it change the narrative a bit of, oh, Lane can't leave Ole Miss for Florida? Well, now will we hear he can leave for LSU and it not be the same pushback that we've got? Yeah, I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. But that is a good point. We have heard it from so many people that it's they love this they have this love story of Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss that we just haven't seen. We really haven't seen it at this level of kind of just staying at this program or why would you leave? I've discussed it from every angle. I don't know if you and I have went to it so much. I think that might have even been a solo episode that I did a couple of weeks ago. But this was you putting your mark on it on social media. If you wanted to expand on that even more.
Yeah, so I mean, this is completely predictable because we saw it last year with a player. So Penn State gets into the playoff, and their backup quarterback, Bo Pribula, decides he's going to opt out while they're playing in the friggin' playoff. And so everybody's like, oh, how could he quit on his team and all this sort of stuff? And you get the same people who are clutching pearls. And the reality is Pribula winds up at Missouri, plays pretty well this year. Missouri's actually in the hunt for some stuff, though they've fallen out recently. But I mean, Pribula did what was best for him, given the way college football is set up. And he even said that it like pained him to do it to his teammates and all that sort of stuff. But the system that was set up with the portal, the way it was set up, led him to make the decision that was best for him, not for his program. And that, we try to teach kids, like, if one of my kids comes to me and says, hey, I want to quit. Like, I'm not enjoying playing baseball or football or whatever. I want to quit. Like, my wife and I say, okay, but you're going to finish the season, right? Like, that's a life lesson we want them to learn. At the same time, if he'd signed a contract to play baseball and somebody else came up and offered him $6 million to go break that contract, which, by the way, has a buyout. If somebody paid him the money to do that, to break that contract and go someplace else, I'd be like, Godspeed, young man, go make that kind of money. Like, everybody's acting like this is some Bobby Bowden, like, Florida State invested in Bowden. How could he turn it? Like, that's not the way college football works anymore. It's not the way anything works in life.
That's
like,
a good point.
You have a contract. The contract pays you to show up and fulfill the tenets of the contract. Lane Kiffin is not doing anything that violates the tenets of his contract. And because if he was, then Ole Miss would fire him for cause. Or Ole Miss wouldn't fire him for cause because they like having him around and are hoping and just praying that he decides to stay and that they're not going to be the scorned lover sitting there at the table. But so here's the thing. When Nick Saban left Alabama, the season ended December 31st, or when he left Alabama, when he left Miami, the Dolphins, the season ended on December 31st with a loss to the Colts. January 1st, he met with the athletic director at Alabama. January 3rd, he met with Wayne Huizenga, the owner of the Dolphins, and then accepted the Alabama job. So are you telling me there were no discussions going on before December 31st between Saban and Alabama? Not a friggin' chance, right? Like, absolutely that had been talked about. And if you go back and read the articles, all the Dolphins beat writers are calling Saban a quitter, and they're calling him a turncoat and all that sort of stuff. And it turns out that when you go out and then become the most successful college head coach in history, nobody remembers that. That is a wart on the back of like one of the random stops on Saban's career. He will be known for championships at LSU and at Alabama.
And there you go. But with that, I don't remember. I know it's changed. I know. I don't remember in the late 90s when he turned Michigan State into a pretty good program. People were complaining, why is he leaving Michigan State and going to LSU?
Well, I'll tell you, the one in particular is he left Toledo. He was a head coach at Toledo. Turned them around in year one, goes 9-2. And then he left the Toledo program in February, to go take a job as defensive coordinator with the Browns under Bill Belichick. And so, I mean, you look at that now with where Belichick is and go, oh my God, like what a move, right? And honestly, it probably set up Saban in a way that staying at Toledo would not have. But to leave a program in February when you've recruited all these guys who come in, like, I don't know when signing day was back in like 1989 or whatever that was, but the reality is that these guys are all mercenaries, and they're mercenaries for a reason, because Billy Napier didn't get to finish his term here at Florida. Houston Nutt at Ole Miss, Ed Orgeron at Ole Miss, David Cutcliffe at Ole Miss. Like, those guys didn't get to finish their contracts out. You look at, I mean, most of the time you don't get to finish your contract out because the fan base gets tired of losing if you're not winning national championships, and eventually forces you out. The only guy right now who I can think, like, look at Clemson. They're even starting to get a little bit antsy with Dabo Swinney, right? Even though he's won 3 national championships. Virginia Tech, they got antsy with Frank Beamer. How's that worked out for that program? I'm hoping that James Franklin can turn them around, because I'm a Hokie too. But the reality is they've been out in the wilderness for a really long time since they've made that choice. So for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, coaches have been mercenaries because the colleges have treated them that way. And the idea that the playoff is going to change that. No, you know what the playoff did? The playoff put more money into the system. And now that there's more money into the system, you've got more bidders for the top guys. So
and you can afford to make the move.
Well, maybe. I think so. This
There's
actually
a limit to that. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, honestly, it also forces you to not be able to wait around.
Yeah,
for me, you can't afford it
until they start putting restrictions on the player procurement. So until the transfer portal doesn't open up until after the national championship game, and until there's some window where, like, the coaches come in, or maybe you just have a moratorium, right? I mean, like, the transfer portal window opens up like 3 or 4 days before the national championship.
January 2nd, right?
Yeah. Why don't you restrict the movement of coaches? Well, you know why they don't restrict the movement of coaches? Because that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that, which is why we're in this situation in the first place, because the colleges for years have been breaking antitrust law in order to restrict the salaries on their players. And NIL has burst onto the scene in a way that's uncontrolled, because college administrators are not incentivized to do the right thing by their employees. They're incentivized to maximize the amount of money that they make for their shareholders. And that fundamentally is why this whole thing is broken, because Florida wants to be able to go get Lane Kiffin, and Ole Miss, as much as they don't like Lane Kiffin coming to their, leaving their school, want to go be able to get Sumrall from Tulane, or want to go be able to get the guy with the go-go offense from Sacramento State, or want to be able to go, rape and pillage whatever mid-level school that they need for the transfer portal. Ole Miss can't talk about loyalty when their whole damn team was made up from the transfer portal last year. Like, Human Beelan is over there on defense. They got half the guys on the defensive side of the ball last year from the transfer portal. And you're sitting here talking about loyalty? No, because that's not the way the system works. And to be honest, it's not the way any system works in any organization. Now, if you want to treat the players like employees, and you want to have contracts that are multi-year, if you want to negotiate, like, Ole Miss was free to negotiate with Lane Kiffin a buyout that was so expensive that he couldn't go anywhere else. Ole Miss was absolutely free to negotiate a contract that had no buyout, right? Where Lane Kiffin would be in breach of contract if he left, and they could prevent him from coaching. Like, those are all things they could have put into the contract, just like Scott Strickland could have put offset language into Billy Napier's contract so that we didn't have to pay him $90 million freaking dollars or whatever it is to not coach. 30 million, I think, or 20 million is, I think, what it is. But I guess my point is that you have the ability to sign whatever contract you want to sign when it comes to the coaches, because that's how the law works. And the fact that they're upset that they didn't have the leverage at the time to negotiate the terms they wanted in the contract, or that they didn't have the stones to hold out and negotiate those terms into the contract when Kiffin was at FAU, and quite honestly didn't have he didn't have 19 programs salivating over him when he was at FAU. Now, maybe he would have waited without the right contract terms from FAU. Maybe Jimmy Sexton wouldn't agree to the kinds of terms that I'm throwing out there. I wouldn't if I was an agent in his situation. But this is the reality, right? Is that coaches drive success, coaches drive wins, and so they have all the leverage. And again, Lane Kiffin here has the leverage, and he's got Florida fans wearing T-shirts saying, "Please come to the swamp." He's got LSU fans trying to convince people that Baton Rouge isn't a pit and that the program isn't toxic. And he's got Ole Miss fans chanting, "We want Lane," and then going on Twitter going, "To hell with that guy," because they don't really know what they want. Like, it turns out the head coach has leverage. He's using it. And, I'm not going to sit here and cry for a program that would in an instant take advantage of this situation if it had the opportunity. And now that feels like it is being taken advantage of, wants to cry. The SEC has dominated everything for years in college football. You had every possible opportunity to try to build things. And if Kiffin's looking someplace else, you got to look in the mirror and say, why is that? And maybe it's because you didn't have a full stadium against the Citadel.
He kind of brought that up too in his post game. Well, quickly though, you did a great job of that. But quickly on the, if you don't want to get into it, fine. But I did. The whole that whole national media. I mean, look, Peter Burns is a friend of mine, but why would you leave Ole Miss? Why would you leave this? The broadcast Saturday night during the game. How can you leave this great atmosphere that you're seeing? And we've seen it. We've seen it from, and like I said, our Chronicle did it a couple of weeks ago. Deep dive into this whole notion that, he shouldn't leave Ole Miss. He can't leave Ole Miss. Why would he? In this new world of college football, Florida's behind Ole Miss. LSU's behind Ole Miss. It's ridiculous. I think there's a part of this where rev share now, since it kicks in, kind of evens the playing field back to what it was a little bit before, and maybe some more of the quote unquote NIL, quote unquote money under the table would now be the difference maker, since everybody's got the rev share to play with now. So what did you do before everything was even? So there's going to be a ton of support at Florida. I've said that time and time again, for a coach that can be sold like Lane Kiffin. But it just gets tiring. And I'll fully admit it's from orange and blue glasses. It's from orange and blue clothes. It's from Gator fans. It's being biased. I completely, but I've been tired of just seeing as Nicholas Roca says here. Thanks for the donation, Nicholas. College football media begging, groveling, and pleading for Lane not to leave has been the most pathetic and weird things I've seen in a long time.
Well, the best part is the guys from The Athletic and the guys from On3 who are complaining about this, because what were those organizations' business models? And I'm not criticizing the business model, but those organizations' business models were, we are going to go rain cash down and hire the best and the most prominent sports figures out there away from the smaller entities or the established entities. And we're going to put it all in one place, and we're going to build super entities. And then in the
case of On3, if you were a 24/7 sports network, we're going to steal you from 24/7. You're going to be now become part of On3.
And then we'll go buy rivals, right? So the thing is it turns out that business is business, and all these sports writers, when they had an opportunity to make more money, and look, I'm not begrudging these guys. I would have done the same thing, which is the reason why I refuse to criticize the coaches or the players when they go do it, because I understand I have mouths to feed at home. And so if you told me, Dave, that I was going to have to pay you to come on the podcast, I'd be like, I don't need to do this. like that makes no sense, right? Like if it's going to cost me money to do that, or if somebody offers me $3 million a year to do it, Dave, I love you. I'll text you, but I'm gone, man. They put a non-compete on there. I'm out. And these guys have done the exact same thing when given the opportunity. And so, okay, that's fine, right? It is the way things work. When someone offers you more money, you're doing it because it's good for your family, and you're doing it out of righteousness. But when somebody else does it, how dare they be disloyal? And maybe this is that I was scarred as a young employee where I worked for an organization that, I was loyal to, or I saw other people who were loyal to, and then the cuts came, right? And when the cuts came, even if they were done in a humane way, and even if they were done in a way that gave people time to kind of find a landing spot and that sort of stuff, it was still a painful experience when those cuts came through, right? And anybody who's ever been let go has felt that sort of pain and that ego hit and all that sort of stuff that comes with being let go, regardless of whether you latch on and regardless of whether you even end up in a better situation because of it. Now, is the grass always greener? No, I think Kiffin. I mean, look, I think Florida fans are going to think it's great that Kiffin's trolling Ole Miss as he moves to Florida, assuming that's where he ends up. I think Florida fans will get very tired of Lane Kiffin's trolling once he becomes Florida coach, assuming he becomes Florida coach, and decides that he's going to put that out in the world in a way that rubs Florida's fans' noses in the fact that Florida is not the be-all, end-all in Lane Kiffin's life. And to be honest, it's sort of interesting when you think about the journey that he's been on. In some ways, you think about a guy who grew up as the son of a head coach And so football was, I'm assuming, Kiffin's identity, and his ability to, like, his self-worth probably came from being a football coach. I think that I would bet you that after he got fired by Oakland and after he got left on the tarmac at USC, that those were probably very, very difficult days for Lane Kiffin. And in fact, he's probably needed to separate his self-worth from being a head coach. And at this point, like, that separation means he doesn't really care what other people think. And in some ways, I think that's healthy and makes him probably a more effective coach. But it's going to drive whatever fan base he's with nuts, right? Like the fact that he'll call Kirby fat amuses the crap out of me. But at some point, he's going to call somebody I care about fat. I'm going to be like, that guy, what an a-hole. And that's just sort of, here's the deal: is the guy can be an a-hole. And that's sort of the reality of the situation. But it's not like Ole Miss didn't know that when he went there. They knew exactly who they were hiring. And they pretty much knew that they were exchanging 4 or 5 years to help rehab his image to allow him to take a next step, assuming he was successful. And if you'd have told
did anybody think when he got the job that he was going to retire at Ole Miss?
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have told Ole Miss fans that over the last 3 years of his career there, he'd win 32 games and they'd make a playoff appearance, but that he'd leave before he went to the playoff, one, they would have said, why would somebody do that? But then the second thing they would have said, sold, I'll take it, right? Sign me up for it immediately. And so now it's just a matter of, it could be a little better, how could someone do this? Like, I mean, it is in some ways like, you're getting married and you walk in and see the groom or the bride kissing the best man. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, this isn't the way this is supposed to go. And so, there's a little bit of that. I get it. Like, I understand that it sucks. Like, I understand that this isn't great for Ole Miss. I don't like it. I wrote about it last week and said it feels dirty, but I don't think it feels dirty because of Kiffin. I think it feels dirty because this is the way college football has set things up. The calendar is terrible. And the fact that they're still under some auspices that kids need to register for classes, which is why we have to have the transfer portal open. Oh, come on. Like, even when I was in school, I took an introduction to music literature class. It was the only class I ever took where they took attendance. I walked in the first day and it was football players and more football players in that class. And it was like, oh my goodness. Like, I'm sitting there going, why are they taking attendance? I'm like, oh, that's why they're taking attendance, because Rex Grossman is in here with me. And it's like literally the first day the professor puts up something, goes, this class is a whole note. And I'm like, I think I might be successful in this class. I think this is a good break for my engineering courses to take this thing. Like, these guys, come on, like, just have a football transfer portal business management course that doesn't start till February, has some sort of accelerated learning or accelerated classroom, whatever. There is a way to allow someone to register in February and get them into a particular class so that they can be eligible for spring practice, so that you can go. There is a way to make this work. And the fact that they choose not to make it work is indicative, I think, of the fact that they actually like it. I think that there is that, or at least it does not cost the powers that be any money to do it this way. It doesn't cost them any more money. In fact, if you think about it, like, let's say they had a moratorium where it was like there was a week after the season where you could hire coaches, that would drive prices up.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine, like, if Cignetti couldn't sign an extension, or if, like, he just said, well, we're just going to wait till the moratorium. Like, we're just going to wait till a week and then we'll see. Right. Yeah. You got like 5 coaches going to that thing. And this game of musical chairs where, like, the Alabamas are sitting there going, oh, Kalen DeBoer, how do we get rid of that guy in this week so we can bring somebody else in? And, I just, again, I look at it and I say the statement I made earlier, which is that it's a free market and you have to deal with it. And if you don't like the terms of the contract, don't sign it. And Ole Miss signed a contract with Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin signed a contract with Ole Miss. As long as neither one of them is not living up to their end of the contract. And let's be honest, Lane Kiffin winning this many games at Ole Miss is more than living up to his end of that contract. As long as he's not doing anything outside of that contract. And look, if they don't want him to court other schools, put that in the contract. if they don't want him to be active on Twitter, put that in the contract. Like, there's all sorts of stuff you can put in the contract, but no one does it because they don't have any leverage. And so, oh, I'm sorry you don't have leverage. Not my problem.
All right, plenty of storylines to get along with this Lane Kiffin thing, about all the LSU talk, everything else. We got some more storylines to get into before we get to the end of this episode of Gators Breakdown. But everybody, there is a game this weekend. There is a game. And right there in Gainesville, night game in the Swamp against Tennessee, rival Tennessee. We'll talk about that game later on this week, of course. This week's going to be splintered. But you can find all the betting action. You can still bet. If you want to bet on Florida, if you want to not bet on Florida, you can do it right there at MyBookie. Florida's 4.5-point underdogs in Tennessee. Over under is 57.5. How does Florida respond at home? Been quite a while, about a month since the Gators have had a home game. What does it look like? Well, if you go bet at MyBookie, you have one account, you got one wallet. You can bet football all weekend and spend some time playing those casino games. You don't have to switch apps. You don't have to jump to another platform. All your action right there at MyBookie. Speaking of football, of course, they got the NFL. You get the player props. You get all that and more. The game lines, super contest, survivor pools. You can bet it all right there at MyBookie. It's your one-stop sports book and casino all in one. If you're new to MyBookie, use our promo code Gators, and your first bet up to $500 is fully covered with the bet back bonus. No stress, just a one-time rollover on your return bet, so you can reload and keep firing. Sign up at mybookie.ag with promo code Gators and claim your bets back bonus. So, Will, where a lot of this comes from today, we'll kind of go through everything that has come out a good bit this Monday. And first, the big part of this is multiple outlets reporting that there's going to be an ultimatum. There's going to be an ultimatum for Lane Kiffin to have a decision made what he's going to do before the Egg Bowl, which is next week. He's got to figure it out during this bye week before they start prep in earnest for their big bowl game, their Super Bowl in the state of Mississippi, of course, the Egg Bowl, which is being played next Friday into the day after Thanksgiving. There's a very interesting angle there for Ole Miss is, okay, are you going to force Lane Kiffin to do this? He holds all the leverage here. I mean, you're going to tell him he's not going to coach? You're going to fire him? If he just says, no, I want to coach the game? Well, I mean, what is the play here? I understand. I've said this. They need an answer. They'll want an answer. I mean, they'll have the answer either way, whether he wants to coach that game or not, coach them in the playoff or not. They're going to have a decision more than likely about if he's going to Florida, if he's going to LSU. Very interesting angle from the Ole Miss side of things, at least this particular timeline here. I don't blame them. They have to know something. It does seem like it's fading that he's going to stay in Oxford. It's gotten kind of toxic. You've seen, we saw all over Twitter and message boards posts about how they were sick of him after, the first half versus Florida when it didn't look all that good. And they were, oh, he can go to Florida. This is what we're going to get. and all that kind of talk. It's gotten toxic on that end, and understandably so. The first half of this episode, we just talked about it. You can understand why it's gotten to a point right there. Ole Miss does need to know. Their future is in play here as well, of finding their next head coach, of getting their ducks in a row for an Egg Bowl. Like, if they lose that game, there's an outside shot they don't make the playoff. They won't host one if they lose against Mississippi State. That's the big thing. If they do make the playoff, they lose the chance of hosting a home game. And then there's the playoff. I mean, there's a playoff run here. This is as close as they might ever get. I know the Ole Miss fans don't want to hear that, but they might not ever get this close again. I understand their school pride. I'd have a lot of it in myself as well. So you get the ultimatum, you get the timeline here. But it is it's fascinating, at least, to watch that storyline of it all.
Well, I mean, so when you make an ultimatum, like if I walk in to my boss's office and I say, "Give me a raise or else," they call me on or else, I'm screwed because I need my job. I need the health insurance. I need the money coming in every month. Like, that's just sort of the reality, right? Lane Kiffin has more money than he knows what to do with at this point. And Lane Kiffin has a contract that has very specific terms if they decide to fire him. So if they decide to fire him, like James Franklin just negotiated a buyout with Penn State as part of, apparently as part of his deal with Virginia Tech. And Brian Kelly is in some weird fight with LSU about the buyout money in his contract. Florida just didn't even bother negotiating, just handed it all to Billy Napier. So if they want to get rid of him, that's cool, but they've now burdened themselves with buyout money, right? Like, so does Ole Miss two things? If Ole Miss fires him, like, what are you doing? Right? Like what is the alternative? And so they put an ultimatum down, and Kiffin doesn't have to care.
Yeah.
Like Kiffin can just say, whatever, guys, I'm not answering your question. I said I'd deal with this at the end of the year. I'm gonna deal with it at the end of the year. Right. He's perfectly his rights to do that. Right. Like he doesn't have to tell them his personal business in terms of what he's doing. He doesn't owe them anything. So if they came in and said, what are you going to do or else? Well, now he knows that there's like worry on that side and that they will push him out when they have an opportunity, when he no longer has the leverage and all that sort of stuff. They sort of exposed themselves for the mercenaries that they are. And so I don't really blame him for being a mercenary on the other side. Now, could Kiffin have handled this better? Sure. I think the 2026 Ole Miss hats they had in his truck on Saturday morning, probably not the best thing in the world, because it gets people's hopes up and certainly. But the other thing I think to remember, Dave, is Twitter is not real life. So I was actually a little bit concerned about Gator fans because I forget that Twitter is not real life going into this, because there were a lot of people with making threats on Twitter about, seeing Gator fans in the Grove and, coming at them with weapons and all sorts of other stuff. And did anybody get hurt when they were tailgating at Ole Miss? No, in fact, most of the people told me that I reached out to said it was awesome. Like they had a great time in the Grove. They had great conversations.
Brett for Harmonic Woods said, dude, Grove was awesome.
Yeah.
He said it was fun.
So Twitter's not real life, right? So the people on the Ole Miss side are like, oh, the heck with that guy. Like,
and I reached out to people last week to help my Harmonic Woods people. They had no issue. Yeah, we'll tell them where to set up, and I like to stop by and check it out. Yeah.
The other thing is anybody who actually contributes like significant amounts of money to the NIL program has executed a contract in their life. I guarantee it. Understands how it works, understand how leverage works, all that sort of stuff. So I sort of look at it and go, you can say ultimatums all you want. Like I can look at my toddler and I can say, you're going to go to bed or you're going to take a bath. Otherwise you're going to bed early. And when he just like decides to hurl himself onto the floor and scream, he doesn't know it, but I'm completely helpless at that point. Like I got nothing else. I got nothing left. And if he just sat there and screamed all night, flailing on the floor, like at some point I'd be like, whatever, I'm just going to fine. Like give him the candy bar. Now I know I can hold out longer than he can because he's 4, he's stupid. And so, I can win that battle. But the reality is here, if Lane Kiffin's patient, he will win this battle regardless of where he wants to go and regardless of what he wants to do. So the only thing it did was it probably pissed him off a little bit. And so, from all reports, Layla and Knox were in Baton Rouge today. In a way that made it pretty public they were in Baton Rouge today.
So here's the storyline on that. So travel rumors today. Sorry, Will, but just we'll clear all that up to get to the next step. Travel rumors been confirmed. Sounds like Layla and Knox were in Gainesville yesterday, while Chris Kiffin and his family were joined by Layla as well in Baton Rouge today. So Layla and Knox in Gainesville yesterday, and then Layla with Chris Kiffin and his family in Baton Rouge today. Now back in Oxford is the family as we are recording at 9:00 at night here right now. But obviously this thing is moving in some directions to get this thing figured out during this bye week, before the Egg Bowl. If there is, I don't think the Ole Miss ultimatum had anything to do with this. I think the bye week came at a perfect time with all the coaching rumors and search out there. It was probably going to happen. I think Ole Miss knew it was going to happen, so that's why it comes out. But and then there's the ridiculous rumor out there of the sleuthing out there of one of the most expensive houses in Gainesville went under contract yesterday, a $3.3 million home in the same neighborhood as a lot of prominent UF personas, the former house of one Dan Mullen. You can see it on Zillow. So it does check out that went under contract yesterday. No idea who's put an offer in. I think it's just coincidence and timing with everybody's looking for all the breadcrumbs out there of what's happening. But Lane Kiffin was not in Gainesville on Sunday. Lane Kiffin was not in Baton Rouge on Monday. We'll see what the rest of the week holds. We'll see if maybe some thought of Lane visiting Gainesville and or Baton Rouge at some point this week in person. I don't know what the contract states about that. His contract, I have no idea. But at the same time, these things can happen in a neutral location. They can happen virtually, all that. So that's kind of getting everybody caught up. I know you're here because you've probably heard a lot of that, but I am going to try and clear some of it up. It was Layla and Knox in Gainesville on Sunday. It was Layla and Chris Kiffin's family visiting Baton Rouge today. Lane Kiffin not in Gainesville or Baton Rouge on Monday. And I don't think they bought Dan Mullen's old house.
None of which actually convinces me that Kiffin's coming to Gainesville or Baton Rouge.
Right.
Because I look at that, the way you tell that story is, so Ole Miss's executives come in and go, "We need an answer." And he goes, "No." And they go, "We need one." And he goes, "All right, I guess I'll explore my options then."
Yeah.
Right. And then he sends people out publicly to basically give the double middle finger to the people who are asking for the options, because he knows they're going to come back and be like, "We're sorry, Lane. We really didn't need to know." Right. And I mean, you think about guys with giant egos. What would they want? They would want Ole Miss crawling back. Like, I can envision this as a complete, I want to stay at Ole Miss, but damn it, I'm putting that athletic director in his place for coming in and insisting that I give him an answer.
You know what scene it reminds me of?
Hard.
You know what scene it reminds me? It reminds me of one of the opening scenes in Happy Gilmore, where the girl walks out and then he gets on the pager when she's walking down, and she says, "Fine, screw you, leave." Yeah, fine, screw you, leave. You stink anyway. Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean that.
Well, and sometimes she comes back, and sometimes you end up with the random Asian woman in your apartment is the answer here. And so Ed Orgeron may be at Ole Miss before we're done. I think that, yes. I mean, I have no idea, right? I think anybody who pretends they know what's going on in Lane Kiffin's head is probably projecting. And look, are Florida folks really confident that Kiffin is interested? Yeah, I think so.
So are LSU folks, by the way.
So are LSU folks. And I'll be honest, until this week, when Ole Miss started putting their foot down and making demands, I think they were pretty confident that Lane Kiffin was going to want to stay. And I think they should. I mean, were it me, I would want to stay at Ole Miss because I'd want the statue in Oxford. Like, he can do something that no one else, that Nick Saban couldn't do, right? Nick Saban couldn't win a championship at Ole Miss because he had to go to the blue blood programs to get it done, right? You already mentioned Michigan State. I mentioned Toledo. Like, he wasn't winning national championships there. Now, college football is different, but like, that's what I would want if I were in that situation. But I'm also way more conservative than most coaches, including Lane Kiffin, who's never met a fourth down he didn't want to go for it on. So, I have no idea. And I think, the reality is it's kind of irresponsible to go out there and go, well, on this day we're going to hear something. Nobody knows. Nobody knows but Kiffin. And that's sort of the reality, right? And I can envision a scenario where he's got his family out exploring because he truly is interested. I can envision a scenario where he's got his family out there exploring because he's wanting to drive the price up. I can envision a scenario where he's already made up his mind and now he's just putting up middle fingers to the people that, have quite honestly put up middle fingers to him. And if you think about it from the standpoint of like Lane Kiffin, like, he wanted the Alabama job. There is no doubt that he wanted the Alabama job. And it's pretty clear that there were people who did not want that to happen. And, does he want to stick it to those people? I think it's entirely possible. So, again, one of the reasons my website's called Read and Reaction is I don't try to be an insider. I don't try to get the news first. I just react to what's going on. And this is all silliness until all the dust settles. And like me sitting here going, oh, what could he be doing?
Silly season ramps up. It's in the title. This is what this is.
Well, and I mean, the worst part is I'd much rather be talking about the awesome day DJ Lagway had against Ole Miss, but unfortunately he only had an awesome half. And so that's why we're talking about this, because let's be honest, if Ole Miss had lost to DJ Lagway for a second year in a row, Ole Miss fans would be packing up his stuff.
Yeah.
They'd be like,
that's what I'm saying. I shared him the first half. The message boards post were, get him out of here. This is what we're getting. Your team wasn't ready, all that. And then, of course, the second half happened, but
But this is the point, right? Is if he'd have lost the game to Florida, and then if he'd lost the game to the Egg Bowl and against Mississippi State, and they'd have been like, "Oh, the team wasn't ready." They would have run him out of the town on the rails, right? Now, I'm not sure if he'd have lost those 2 games that he would have had the same appeal to Florida and LSU, but it would have gone from like, we love Lane Kiffin, stay here, Lane, all that sort of stuff, to is he really the right guy? Can he really get us the championship? All that sort of stuff in an instant. So the rumors heading into this offseason, or the offseason for Florida, or after Napier got fired, at least, the rumors were we were probably looking at it like $15 million a season. It's probably going to be closer to 20 now that you've got these 3 entities involved. So if Lane Kiffin,
I don't think it gets above 15.
Well, let's say Lane Kiffin gets a 5-year, $80 million deal, fully guaranteed. That's like life-changing money, right? Now, I'm not sure that Lane Kiffin's hurting for money, but it's still life-changing money. And it's even like life-changing money for your kids and potentially life-changing money for your grandkids. And for somebody who was left on the tarmac for USC, for somebody who was pushed out of Oakland when he was really too young to have that job as a Raiders head coach. And a lot of people sort of celebrated the fact that he got pushed out from the Raiders as, Nepo hire, and, that he only got that job because of his dad and all that sort of stuff. That's what he's had to hear his entire life. So to be able to stand on top of the mountain and say, I've got 3 entities that will all crawl over broken glass to get me to be their head coach, has to feel good.
Yeah.
And it just turns out that maybe, just maybe, when Ole Miss came in and said, we need a decision, he went, no, you don't. Like, you're going to crawl over the broken glass just like Florida is, just like LSU is. And when you come up, you're going to show me how many shards you've got in your body. And that's how I'm going to judge which one I'm going to go to. And by the way, add another $1 million to that. And that's going to be the way he chooses. So, I mean, and that is within his rights. I don't think he'll belong to Florida if he comes here. I don't think he'll belong to Ole Miss if he stays because of the way this is played out.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll belong to LSU if he goes there either, right? And I'm not sure that's important to Lane Kiffin. I think if
I can ultimately see him giving the NFL one more try, and not now, not this go round, but down the road one more time.
Well, we're on the same stuff 4 years from now if he goes to Florida. Like, if he comes to Florida and delivers a national championship, he'll have to make the same choice, right? The choice will be: do I stay at Florida and try and aim for Saban, or do I go to the NFL to do the thing that Saban couldn't do? And I don't know the answer to that. Right.
I don't either. I'll fully admit it. And look, if you get me a title, I do not care. You get me one in the next 4 years, I'll pack your bags in a good way. Thank you, Lane Kiffin. You can go to the NFL. Get me a natty.
Well,
get me a natty.
And so again, I go back and there isn't anyone who's won a national championship at the college level, a national championship of the pros, is there?
Jimmy Johnson.
Did Jimmy Johnson win one at Miami?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so one guy, right? Did he, or did they?
No, he did. He did. But I'm thinking if there's one more.
Oh, Barry Switzer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Switzer won with the Cowboys.
No. Keep going if you want to.
Pete Carroll?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm naming it. So he should stay at Florida, win 9 national championships. What am I talking about here? Apparently, it's not as rare as I thought it was.
Sometimes it's funny. You have to say stuff like that to be like, oh, never mind. Wait, hold on. Never mind. Yes.
It's not really that unique. Yeah. So, I think nobody knows what's in Kiffin's mind. And if we did, it'd be a lot less entertaining. But, he's a risk taker. Like, he has taken the analytics on 4th down, and it's interesting. In this game the other day against Florida, I think he basically won Ole Miss the game by his 4th down decisions. And in fact, I think juxtaposed next to Billy Gonzalez's 4th down decisions, I think he definitely won the game. And
there's one more before you go.
Yeah, go for it.
We named 3 of them: Switzer, Johnson, Carroll.
Oh, jeez.
You're not going to get it.
I mean,
yeah, Paul Brown.
Okay. Yeah, that's before my time there. With right.
Ohio State and Cleveland, but yeah, Paul Brown, Barry Switzer, Jimmy Johnson, Pete Carroll.
Still a pretty good company.
Yeah.
Like you do that, so if you think let's say that Lane Kiffin won a national championship for Florida. Let's say they let him coach through this year and he made it to the championship game with Ole Miss. Then he goes to Florida, wins a national championship at Florida or LSU, either one. And then 5 years from now, he goes to the NFL and he wins a national championship with like sort of one of the downtrodden ones, like the Carolina Panthers or
Tampa. He goes back to Tampa.
I don't know about that. They've won a championship. Like I'm thinking like New Orleans Saints. They'll get him from LSU.
Right. He just comes up the road in Jacksonville and takes the Jaguars to win one.
Well, he can do that too. But I guess let's say he does that, right? If you think for a minute he's not going to look and say, Nick Saban couldn't do that, and make sure he says it out loud and make sure that Saban hears it. I do wonder, like, I'm not sure that the Pete Carroll, Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, like, I don't think that's who he's aiming for, right? Like, and again, I'm not inside his head, but I think the two things that would drive somebody who is seeking approval beyond sort of the situations he had when he was younger would be having multiple programs or organizations crawling over broken glass to get to you, and then doing something that your mentor who kicked you out before the national championship game and then lost the national championship game with a substitute offensive coordinator to do something that he never did. And so
one more angle on that. I would like to know how he views this, because I do think there is a lot to your angle of staying at Ole Miss, doing it at a lower, quote unquote, lower tier school and winning a title there. But then he's also got peers, Steve Sarkisian at Texas, Kirby Smart at Georgia. And it's like, okay, Florida or LSU. I'm at one of those big programs now too. So let's go. I'm like, would there be anything more? I mean, you brought it up a lot of the shot at Kirby. Can I think of anything that I really want to see more right now than Kirby Smart and Lane Kiffin in Florida, Georgia every freaking year? I mean, it got good with Dan Mullen and Kirby Smart. We had our moments. And then we had a recruiting question moment because of what Kirby Smart had to say about recruiting. But Lane Kiffin and Kirby Smart every year, hopefully next year in Atlanta, and the year after in Tampa, and then here in Jacksonville for a long time, makes me giddy. I want to see that. I want to see Lane Kiffin and Kirby Smart, Florida, Georgia every year. I mean, you, in that rivalry, you have streaks. You don't have many upsets. But rarely do we have Florida, Georgia, where both teams are in the top 10. Both teams are fighting for the SEC at the same time. You've had it here or there. But that rivalry has not been Texas, Oklahoma, has not been Ohio State and Michigan. And you don't get the big top matchup, the top 10 matchup all that many times. I would like to think you get it with Lane Kiffin roaming the sidelines in the orange and blue. And I wonder if he thinks it too. Would it mean more to him to do it at Ole Miss, or would it mean a bigger program? Like how I look at Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn in the Iron Bowl, or Bama and LSU when they play, even though they won't play every year. I do wonder if there is I got peers at the bigger schools. I want to be at one of those as well.
Well, so put it this way. Billy Napier said, "Are you not entertained?" when he got up after a recruiting class that wasn't real, that was relatively underwhelming compared to some of his peers. And we all sort of looked at it and said, ugh. If Lane Kiffin goes up there and says, "Are you not entertained?" we will be entertained, because he'll be calling Kirby fat. And he'll be making fun of, the whole thing about Auburn and coloring the coloring books and that burned up in the library and facing George, all the stuff that Spurrier used to do. Like, Kiffin's going to do a lot of that same stuff, and honestly, probably gets it from the head ball coach anyway in some ways. And so, yeah, it'll be entertaining, which I think, quite honestly, given the fact that the offense is terrible right now in Gainesville, just entertaining would be a significant upgrade. And having feeling butterflies going into that Florida Georgia game, as opposed to feeling dread that like, are we going to be able to keep it within 30 would be nice. Right. And it's like this year, like I posted something a little mockingly after Florida's lost to Georgia. I got a little bit of crap for it, but it was basically like, the flag that the banner that said kept it close against Georgia. It's like, come on, guys. Like, that's not what we're going after. That's not what we're here at Florida to do. We're here at Florida to win national championships. And, like, this is the thing, right? Is if Ole Miss was really a job where anybody could do this, then the fans wouldn't be so upset about him leaving. They would just say, all right, next guy up. We'll get the next guy in here to do exactly what Lane Kiffin's done. If it's such a great job with great NIL and great resources and giving the coach everything he needs, it shouldn't be hard to go get Dan Lanning. It shouldn't be hard to go get Marcus Freeman. Shouldn't be hard to go get, whoever you want to fill that spot. But it turns out they might end up with Brian Kelly, or they might end up with Pete Golding, or they might end up with Joe Judge, right? Like, they might end up with Ed Orgeron. Like these are legitimate options. They might end up with Sumrall from
Eli's name is still on the Florida and LSU list when you look at all these articles that are being put out right now.
Yeah, well, he belongs at Ole Miss, I think, but we'll let him go there. That's fine.
Oh, you say Eli to Ole Miss? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it that way. I'm good with that switch. Let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And then Missouri can get Brian Kelly. That'd be awesome. See Brian Kelly to program with like no panache. It'd be awesome. I don't know, man. I look at it and I go, I just want Florida football to be good again. Yeah. And if that requires, so the funny part is I'm defending Kiffin on Twitter today, mainly out of like just general disdain for the guys who are posting stuff who, if they were given a job making 20% more, would immediately jump. But I've said repeatedly on the podcast, I've written it repeatedly. Mm-hmm. He's not the direction I'd go.
I know.
Right? Like if I had my druthers, they would do something completely different than just getting into a bidding war for Lane Kiffin. But Kiffin is the lowest, like he is probably the best guarantee to having like a floor of 8 or 9 wins, right? Yep. And so I understand why Florida fans want him. I understand why Florida boosters want him. I understand why Scott Strickland is quasi allowing this to happen. probably just sort of standing back and go, whoa, like how much, like what are we guaranteeing here? But
if it's strict, it's like boosters. Okay, you're paying this. You're helping pay the buyout for Napier? Okay. Oh, you're helping with this? Okay. All right. As long as it doesn't come out of the fund.
Stadium renovation fund, yeah. I mean, again, I think there are better options. I think there are better ways to build it. But I understand why Florida's going in this direction. I understand why Ole Miss is nervous about it. I understand why LSU would be going in this direction too. I'm just, the worry I have is that Florida will be left at the altar and in desperation will throw millions and millions at Drinkwitz, or millions and millions at Sumrall, or millions and millions at somebody else who, doesn't fix some of the things that I think you need to fix when it comes to college football. I think just in general, the fundraising aspect of things at Florida, and you've said this, that Kiffin has a different effect on the needle at Florida. And so we'll see. But again, I still think it's one of those questions where I can see him going any of the 3 places. And for me to pretend otherwise is really sort of, I think, leading people in the wrong direction. I think anybody who is leading in that direction will probably claim victory if Kiffin ends up coming to Florida. And then it'll be like, well, my sources burned me or something like that if he doesn't. Yeah. I'm just going to say, I don't know, because I don't think anybody but Kiffin knows. And, we'll see where it ends up. And because Florida's put all their eggs in the Kiffin basket, I hope they get Kiffin now. Even though I don't think that's necessarily the best thing for the program, I think it is the best thing for the health of the program to know that they can rattle their saber and get the guy that they want. And so
one comment I don't agree with. Yeah. One comment I don't agree with was that, sorry, Will, I thought you were done, but
go for it.
Hey, Kiffin trolling y'all, trolling LSU. Come on, think for a sec. Do you honestly think would leave a playoff behind? No coach would do that. Yes, there is going to be a coach that does that. It's ridiculous to think that there's, with the expanded playoff with 12 teams, which is going to go probably to 16 at some point, that we're never going to have a coach leave a playoff team. That's just, I think it's an ignorant thought. It's going to happen. It might happen this year with Lane Kiffin. If it's not Lane Kiffin, somebody's going to do it. The playoff is not going to guarantee a coach staying at that school. I don't agree with it at all. I don't think he's trolling. I think he's torn. I think he's having fun with it where it might look like trolling, but I think he's legit interested in Florida. Might be legit interested in LSU. We've talked about it. There's a lot of reasons to want to stay at Ole Miss, but I think he can be completely undecided right now. And to me, that would not come across as trolling if he ends up choosing Ole Miss because he's completely just undecided right now.
Well, and I think it's unfair for Ole Miss fans to sit there and be like, well, why doesn't he just deny it? Because you'll be mad at him on the back end.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like this whole thing where like this completely undermines the documentary. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, if he's undecided, he's saying, I'm not going to answer that question right now, then that's actually acting with integrity in a way that Nick Saban did not act when he was coaching the Dolphins, because he just wanted the questions to end. And so Kiffin could certainly put an end to the questions because he could say, I'm staying here at Ole Miss. I'll be here. The extension will be signed shortly, and you can assume that I'll be there. And then he could leave for Florida and everybody call him a turncoat and a liar and all sorts of stuff. The reality is whoever gets left at the altar is going to call Kiffin a rat.
Yeah.
Irrespective. LSU, if he comes to Florida, will call him a rat. So will Ole Miss. If he stays at Ole Miss, Florida and LSU fans will call him a rat, right? Like there's no winning here for Kiffin in terms of what he could do. The only way he conceivably could have won was by staying at Ole Miss and signing a contract like Signetti or signing a contract like Elko. But even then, you'd have people on the Florida side and the LSU side saying, too scared to compete with the big boys, right? Like there's no way to win unless you just go out and win. And so, he might have the opportunity next year in the playoff next year, right? You come to Florida, turn things around with Lagway, get him to actually stay in the pocket, make the throw. And all of a sudden, Florida's competing for something that Ole Miss could have competed for. And let's be honest, Florida's schedule next year, much, much easier than it has been the last few years. And so, and I would have said, despite all the rumors and all the innuendo and all that sort of stuff, I would have suspected him to be leaning towards Ole Miss. And then all of a sudden you hear all the rumors sort of ramp up as Florida's playing Ole Miss. But again, I think that's kind of natural, right? That you're going to have people start spouting off as the two teams are facing off because one, it's a 3-7 team and it's boring otherwise. But the other part is that Kiffin loves the attention. and
then a bunch of people are starting to get together from both sides.
Well, and so then for Ole Miss to come in and like demand an answer, it's like, who are you? So I bet you my personal opinion is he was probably leaning, I would have said 60-40 Ole Miss before the game. And after the ultimatum, I go 40-60 not Ole Miss at this point. And, look, his daughter goes to school there, but, she's almost an adult. Heck, right. She's out there putting a hex on the LSU linebackers. So maybe he needs to go to LSU just to just to take that hex off of Whit Weeks there. But nobody knows. That's the thing. And everybody who said anything over the last couple of weeks is going to claim they knew whenever this comes through. And I'm just going to tell you straight up right here, I have no idea. I'm waiting for the dust to settle. And there will be some sort of commentary for me on why Lane Kiffin might not work out when he comes, because I don't think he's a sure thing to win a national championship at Florida. Just like I don't think he's a sure thing to win a national championship at Ole Miss. And so, I understand why he might want to make a move, because I think the more shots you get at it, the more opportunities you have. And, you're going to get more opportunities at Florida. You can get more opportunities at LSU.
Nick Nephew says, why would he even consider LSU with the show going on there? The government court battles with Brian Kelly. That lends itself. Maybe they've figured stuff out quickly. And when I talk about alignment at Florida, they're aligned and want to throw everything at him, and certainly have a great recruiting base to go win there as well. You can look at it on the surface and say everything that's going on there the last couple of weeks, why would anybody go there? Especially when many things are going to be equal. Like, the offer from Florida, the offer from LSU is not going to be that much different. So it's just going to be about quality. And then at Ole Miss, it's going to be about the quality and the recent history he has there. But you certainly get the that is an angle of it to LSU, but they still can win at the highest level. Like I said, there's not much difference of Florida at the highest level and LSU at the highest level.
Maybe he just wants to be governor of Louisiana. I mean, it seems like it's a natural path. Go win a national championship. I mean, Tuberville he didn't have to win a natty at Auburn. Like, he just had to have an undefeated season. All of a sudden, he's a senator. So, or House of Representatives, senator. I can't remember what Tuberville is. Doesn't really matter. Yeah. But I mean, who the heck knows what Lane Kiffin's real objectives are? I think what we have realized is that in this case in particular, most of the time, I think the coaches sort of sit there and smile and pretend like they're not smarmy while allowing Jimmy Sexton to be the smarmy one. And in this case, Lane Kiffin just said, I'm going to own it.
Yeah.
like, you know what? You people don't need to hate on Jimmy Sexton. You've hated on him enough. I'm going to make his life really easy by giving him like very public negotiating tools here to make sure that we get what we want. More power to him. That's the way contracts work, man.
Yep. Well, I know your answer to this because you pretty much just said it, and you have said it. John Doe says, so is the UF really comfortable paying more to Kiffin than Smart gets at Georgia when Smart has proven himself with 2 championships? That goes back to the whole conversation. You're not getting a proven coach. You're just not. You're not getting Kirby. You're not getting Dabo. You're not getting Ryan Day. You don't want Dabo right now, by the way. So, yeah, to play the game, you're going to have to pay him. And guess what? If he's higher paid than Kirby Smart right now, he won't be in a month. It ain't going to last. You can make Lane Kiffin the highest paid coach right now. How long do you think that's going to last? This is part of the agent game as well. Jimmy Sexton wants LSU, Ole Miss, Florida to go pay Lane Kiffin $13, $14, $15 million. Because you know what that means? Kirby Smart's going to be a $16, $17 million coach down the road in the not so distant future. That's what this game is. So Florida can make Lane Kiffin the highest paid coach tomorrow. It ain't going to last. So, yeah, you're right. You are throwing a lot of money at him. But to play the game, look, he's what? He's only third behind, only behind Kirby since Saban has gone, but behind wins of Georgia and Alabama in the last 3-4 years, that handful. So beat Georgia last year. Yeah, he didn't take Ole Miss to a SEC championship game. Nobody has. Yeah, he maybe wasted an opportunity last year at Ole Miss to make the playoff. That's why some people argue, well, yeah, you can't. Even with the transfer portal talent you were able to amass last year, still wasn't able to basically separate the talent and lose a game you shouldn't to Kentucky and a team that had talent like Florida. The gap still wasn't there, even though you had the experience to transfer portal talent. That was maybe an example of you can't separate enough at Ole Miss like you can somewhere else if you can recruit better talent. So, Lane Kiffin's a really, really good coach. And I do get the angle, yeah, you got to pay a lot. But if you want to play the game, because if Florida isn't going to pay it, somebody's going to pay it. Ole Miss may have to be the ones to pay it in the end. But there is a lot to this of how much money you're willing to throw. And I know that's one reason, Will, you're against Kiffin and wanting to get creative and find another route to all of this. But if he's the guy, yeah, you're going to pay him. But he won't be the highest paid coach for long.
Well, I mean, he makes $9 million a year right now. And you know that the contract extension sitting in front of him is $13, $14, $15 million a year, right? My guess is Ole Miss has offered to make him the highest paid coach in the SEC. And so, wherever he goes is going to make him the highest paid coach in the SEC. So the way economics work, right? There are a limited number of Lane Kiffins. There are more jobs out there. Like if Lane Kiffin wanted to go to Penn State, he'd go to Penn State. Yeah. If Lane Kiffin wanted to go to LSU, he can go to LSU. If he wants to go to Florida, he can go to Florida. If he wanted to go to Alabama, they might kick like there's, push that guy DeBoer. If he wanted to go to Auburn, he'd be at Auburn, right? Like there are 5, 6, 7 programs that are fighting over the same guy. And it turns out economics works, right? So supply and demand, when there's an enormous demand for a product and there's only one of them, the price goes up and up and up and up and up. And that's why Kirby Smart, with his 2 national championships, will end up getting an extension that pays him more as we go. And yeah, that's exactly the point. Is I think coaches' salaries have inflated to a point where you have to start asking the question of, it used to be like if you were paying Urban Meyer $3 million a year, Like, were you getting enough out of him? Heck yeah, you were, right? Like, that was a good investment. And if you had to pay Meyer 4.5 to get him to stay, okay, yeah, given what you're seeing on the field, absolutely worth it. I think we're slowly, or maybe not slowly, we're rapidly reaching a point though where the salary numbers are getting to a point where you have to ask, is there a different way to do this? And is there a way to do this that sets up a program for long-term success? And to me, that's, you look in the NFL and the way they do it, they separate the general manager, the guy who's building the roster, from the coach, the guy who's coaching him. And I think there is, considering that we keep looking at programs and saying only a championship is necessary, is winning, right? Like just winning the SEC, just winning a bowl game, just winning 10 wins, just making the playoff, like that's not going to be enough at a program like Florida, program like Alabama, program like Georgia, which means you're going to have programs that feel like they've failed even when they've done stuff like Ole Miss is doing right now. And so, yeah, price is going to keep going up. And so that becomes the question, right? Is are you better off with a low-level coordinator, bringing the guy in, somebody who really knows his X and O's, and then supplementing that with a general manager who knows how to get an edge? That is how I would go. That's not how Florida's going. And so, like I said, Florida's decided they want to rattle the saber here. And I think it's bad for the program if they rattle the saber and then don't get the guy they want. Right. I think that reflects poorly on the program in general. Plus, anybody who comes in is definitely the second choice, if not down the list, right? And knows they're the second choice and will be reminded they're the second choice. Until
they better not be, if it's not Kiffin, Scott Strickland better not go up there to the podium and say, this was our top choice all along, because everybody knows it's not. so
we'll see. I mean, look, last night I was watching the Lions game and they're playing, who were they playing last night? It was the Lions and the Eagles. And Sirianni and Campbell were hired in the same year with like 7 other coaches in the NFL. Those 2 are the only 2 who are left. Right? Campbell hasn't won the Super Bowl. Obviously, Sirianni's been there a couple times, won it once. And even then, the fans in Philadelphia are sick and tired of Sirianni. It's like 8-2, but the offense is terrible. What's going on? Right? So, like, even in a situation where he won the Super Bowl last year, Eagles fans are still getting antsy about some of the shortcomings that the team has this year, which I find instructive and interesting, right? There is no tolerance for not being a dynasty at this point. And at the NFL level, 2 out of 7 is like success. Because if you go to the previous year, I'm not sure you'd find 2 who are successful. Certainly, I don't think you'd find a guy who'd won a Super Bowl, mainly because Andy Reid's been winning them all. Right. And so when you have guys like Saban or guys like Smart or guys like Swinney ripping off 2 or 3, there's not an opportunity for other guys to get them. And so if you look at Marcus Freeman, you go, well, he's never won a national championship. Yeah, you're right. He's not on the same level as those guys. You look at Brian Kelly, he's never won a national championship. You're right. He's not on the same level as those guys. And even now you look at Dabo Swinney and his inability to adjust to this new NIL era, and you'd say, you're right. He's not on the same level as these other guys. It's a crapshoot when you start doing this. And the question is, if it's a crapshoot, are you better off taking a shot where it's easier to get out of it? Because let's be honest, we all know after the bump class where the program's headed. We've known for the last 4 coaches that Florida's brought in. The only one I think you maybe could have made an argument for was Muschamp. The problem is his bump class was ranked like number 3 in the country, but it also was like 90% defensive players. And so those defenses were awesome in 2013, not 2013, but 2014, 2015, 2016. And then the bottom fell out because McElwain couldn't recruit. So, yeah, is Florida comfortable? Yeah, I think Florida's comfortable with the amount of money they're going to have to give and the amount of control that they're going to have to give to Kiffin. I'm more hesitant on it, but I understand why they're doing it. Like I said, at this point, now that they've decided to rattle the saber, you got to get the job done. Like at this point, it's the job of the boosters and Scott Strickland to make sure you close the deal. And if you went after a guy who wanted to troll you to then go back to Ole Miss or troll you to go to LSU, well, that's on you then, right? Because part of this is relationships. Part of this is making sure that Jimmy Sexton doesn't make you look like an ass. And, like you obviously need to maintain a you obviously need to maintain a relationship with Sexton. At the same time, he's not going to want to burn bridges either, right? So who knows what he'd said behind the scenes either. My guess is the athletic directors of each of these schools knows way more than any of us does, and the trolling is more for show than it is for showing clicks than it is for the actual eventual outcome.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Last thought here, Will, and maybe the big news of Monday. James Franklin, you mentioned it earlier, agrees to become coach at Virginia Tech. Was he someone to make connections there? Look, I've even admitted everybody's looking for breadcrumbs right now. And was there an angle to James Franklin get the Virginia Tech job? Because there was some talk out there that he might be interested in the Florida job. But obviously, we just talked about it. Lane is number one. It's kind of Lane or die right now, and we'll see where it goes for Florida. But, was there this thought, maybe this good inclination that since he's already decided to go to Virginia Tech, that it connects somehow to Florida and Lane Kiffin, knowing that James Franklin wanted the Florida job? Didn't hear much about James Franklin, the LSU job, so I think that's where some of this comes from. Some of that thought comes from, Jimmy Sexton probably knowing how this thing will play out somewhat. So, hey, Franklin, Florida's not going to be open because I have another client who might take that in Lane Kiffin. So if you wanted a Florida job, it's not going to be available. Go take Virginia Tech if you're interested there. That is an angle to it. I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just trying to connect it back to Florida. If you're looking for breadcrumbs, that might be one. That might be a scenario here. But all in all, you kind of taking it a little bit further, interesting hire for Virginia Tech out there. I know, like you said, you follow that program a bit too. You have connections there. You went to school there as well as Florida, so you have some connections there. But going from Penn State to Virginia Tech was a consistent program for a little while. That's certainly had two head coach. Is it two head coaches since Three? Okay, since he's retired, and certainly have not been able to replicate any of the glory that Beamer did, especially in the late 90s. But it was a program of consistency, and you could watch that program and see them jumping up and down and Enter Sandman, one of the best entrances in college football. And it was always exciting to watch a Virginia Tech game. Hasn't been there. Can James Franklin elevate that program? Interesting hire to me. Very interesting hire, how it would turn out. But does get in the ACC. So he doesn't have to worry about in Ohio State or Michigan or the programs that he had trouble beating there at Ohio State. His big game now will be a weakling or weaker Dabo Sweeney and Clemson and Miami, who can't find any kind of mark of consistency except for not living up to a billing once they get to it in the first half of the season. Florida State, if they ever turn around, it's going to probably be a much, much easier path for James Franklin. But I had to bring the Florida angle in there a little bit.
Sure. I mean, I think so. First off, if I were a program, can they sue Jimmy Sexton for antitrust violation? Like, doesn't he have a monopoly here? Like, when you've got multiple clients, you can play off each other in the shadows. That seems sort of exactly what you're trying to avoid when it comes to that sort of law. So it is two coaches for Virginia Tech. So Justin Fuente went 43 and 31, and then Brent Pry goes 16 and 24. They've had a couple of interims in between there. That's why I was sitting there saying I thought it was 3. But I mean, look, Beamer built that program from nothing. Like, they were an independent. I have pictures of when my dad was a kid where the stadium doesn't even have it's just stands. I mean that, and let's be honest, Blacksburg, Virginia, Southwest Virginia, it's real close to Tennessee. It's not Northern Virginia. It's not right next to Washington, D.C. Now, there are a ton of alums up in the Washington, D.C. area who've done very well for themselves with all of the defense contractor and all that stuff that's up in the Northern Virginia area. And those are the folks who sort of fund the program. I think I think James Franklin is a good fit, right? Because I think Virginia Tech fans will be patient with a guy who's building the program to something. If you look at Fuente, the problem is he sort of flamed out the last couple of years. If you look at Pry, it's because he never really built anything, and you could sort of see things were just sort of stagnant. Beamer almost got fired. Like that's the thing everybody really who doesn't know that program doesn't really understand. Beamer had a really bad year. I think it was like his third year, and they stuck with him, and then he started turning it around. And I think that Franklin will get that kind of time. And like you said, even right now, if all they do is lose to Clemson and Miami, that's a successful season for Virginia Tech right now, which is funny because that's kind of where Florida is too, right? If Florida has a season where they go 10-2 and lose to Georgia and Texas, right? Like right now, Florida fans would be like, sign me up. Now, 5 years from now, if he's still losing to Georgia and Texas, if Kiffin's still losing to Georgia and Texas, then it'll no longer be sign me up, and it'll be, who's next. But which is exactly what happened at Penn State. So I think Franklin will get to that point, and then it'll be a question of the patience there. As far as how it pertains to Florida, yeah, I mean, basically it was clear then that James Franklin was not a candidate. And does that mean Kiffin's coming? Maybe. Does it mean there's somebody else who's a Sexton client who's going to slide into Florida if Kiffin doesn't come? Sure, probably, right? Like he represents damn near all of them. So it's really just a question of how do you move the chess pieces on the chessboard and in a way that maximizes everybody's income, and that's really his job. So I don't like. I love that Franklin's a Virginia Tech, but I don't really read a lot into that one, and mainly because the way I would be in the situation that Kiffin's in is I would be conflicted. And so I suspect that he's conflicted. And he probably wakes up on Monday and goes, wow, it'd be awesome to be at Florida. And then he wakes up on Tuesday and goes, but I can win a championship here. And that would be something that Saban can't do. And then he wakes up on Wednesday and goes, but it would be really easy to do that at Florida. Then he wakes up on Thursday and goes, Baton Rouge, kind of a nice place. I might be able to go gamble a little bit. Bourbon Street's kind of nice, pretty close. He wakes up on Friday and goes, oh crap, I got to get ready for Mississippi State. But,
it is funny. He goes to the comment right here. We talked about it earlier. We'll end it with this. It might be my friend Blake Ruffino, who this adventures, that's too long of a name. But LSU podcast seems to think they're the favorite to Lane Kiffin. What y'all think? I hear good Florida stuff. I have Florida sources. So, of course, now I got some LSU sources. And if it's Blake you're talking to, me and Blake have been talking the last few days. I got some sources in the agent world, too. As I'm saying, but of course, where I'm at right now, look, I don't have great national sources. I can reach out to people who might know Chris Lowe. I put it on the podcast last week. Bill King, who knows Chris Lowe, and Chris Lowe thinks that Lane Kiffin will end up at Florida, but maybe that was before LSU ramped up in earnest this past weekend, all that kind of stuff. There's so many variables and how much has changed in the last couple of days and few days, especially on the LSU angle of going all in and the pressure they're putting on in this situation as well. But I can tell you, there's a lot of confident people in Florida's building right now. And the people I talk to who's been right about a lot of things. But this is different. This is silly season's in the title for a reason. This LSU people are going to hear positive LSU remarks. I will say Ole Miss doesn't seem to be as positive now. They're right. A lot of their writers and message boards, I've seen it. They're mods on their boards. It's not me making it up. They're not feeling too great right now about Lane staying in Oxford. But there seems to be a lot of Florida people confident for Florida. And now in the last 24, 48 hours, LSU feeling pretty confident as well. Obviously, somebody's getting played. Doesn't mean it's trolling by Lane Kiffin. This is how coaching searches work. It's a love triangle right now. That's really all it is. And it's going to play out like one.
So there's an episode of Gators Breakdown, if you go back into the archives, where you, me, and Bill Sykes are talking about how awesome it is that Florida's been able to go hire Chip Kelly. And so I keep that in mind every time we think about something being a done deal, because I don't think you had as good of sources as you do now. I definitely didn't have the same sources that I have now. But that was basically about as done as something could be done. And then it wasn't. And so, I think anybody who's heard anything at this point, like the reason you would post something or tweet something or put something out there that doesn't actually give specifics is because you don't actually have specifics about what's like. If you did, then you would put that out there, right? And you would say this is definitive and here's what's happening and all that sort of stuff. And I don't have that. You don't have that. I don't think anybody has that because I'm not sure Lane Kiffin knows. And is he leaning one way? Probably. And I think there's probably, but I mean, it's what I said earlier about contracts. He doesn't know anybody anything until he signs the contract. So maybe even shook a hand with somebody at Florida. Maybe Hugh Hathcock and Gary Condren went up there and shook his hand and he agreed to something. And, again, no knowledge, right? But maybe that happened. Doesn't matter. Until the signature is on the line, he has zero obligations to Florida. And you would say that really his only obligation is to listen. And so I think it would be a dereliction of his duty if his goal is to drive up the coaching chain to not listen. I think probably it would be a dereliction of his duty to not listen because it drives up his overall price, even if he's going to stay at Ole Miss. And you know what? The wounds at Ole Miss will immediately be healed if he stays and wins a national title or even just leads them deep into the playoffs. It's amazing how easy it is to forgive your girlfriend for looking at somebody else when she comes back home with you. Right. And that's all that's going to happen here. And, if he stays at Ole Miss, they'll forgive him. If he comes to Florida, he'll be persona non grata in Oxford until they have somebody else there or until, he crashes and burns at Florida, at which point they'll just mock him. Or at LSU, they'll mock him there.
7 years ago, Will. Florida interested in Chip Kelly? 8 years ago, I guess. Wait.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I just remember Bill was on like day shifts. So we had to, or like night shifts. We had to like do it after he got home from the night shift or something. So it was like 2 a.m. or something. we're recording the stupid episode about Chip Kelly that turned out to be kind of a mess. So
look how young we were back then. And
yeah, I had dark hair,
not HD video.
I'm still sitting on my couch with a headset on.
But the string of episodes, please don't reset. Oh, it reset. But anyway, there were like 5 episodes that all had Chip Kelly's name in it.
Yeah, so
now,
it's entirely possible.
There's been a lot more Lane Kiffin titles in the last couple of weeks as we have expanded Gators Breakdown.
That's just because he keeps it interesting. If Chip Kelly had been out there tweeting about it the entire time,
true.
We would have been like, "Oh my God!" He tweeted about he tweeted about UCLA and the athletic director's dad. What does that mean?
And not only that, he's the clear top guy. Chip Kelly wasn't the clear top guy then.
No, in fact, I think most of us were.
It was Kelly, Mullen. Who else was it? Would have been the top targets that cycle.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming in from...
I can't remember now. I mean,
49ers head coach Chip Kelly coming to UCLA after that. It's like, oh my goodness.
The string of episodes. Florida interested in Chip Kelly? Florida meets with Chip Kelly. Florida versus Florida State preview. More Chip Kelly talk. Florida hires Dan Mullen.
I'll just tell you right now, the mutiny's coming. If it's all these silly season, Lane Kiffin, Florida hires Eli Drinkwitz. No, I will not stand for it. We will lead the Shiano-like mutiny.
Yes, we will. All right, man. Good stuff. I hope we covered enough for you guys out there. Good bit of you watching, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be on YouTube. I know I would say this is not a tease or anything like that. It's just with Ole Miss being on the bye week, with everything that come out today, certainly just be on the lookout. Who knows where this thing's going to go on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Who knows? There's a lot that's going to be happening right here with the Florida Gator coaching search and Lane Kiffin, the LSU side of it as well, the Ole Miss side of it. There is just a lot going on. High Top Professor here. A great reminder. First of all, thanks for hopping in, Professor, but hit the like button, everybody. And why are you in here? Just a lot going on now, trying to really just put it all together for you out there. There's just so much going on. And I know every Gator podcast, especially on Monday nights, is live. So there's a lot to spend your time on. But I'm glad you can do so right here with Gators Breakdown. So Yeah, I mean, a lot of comments. If Florida hires Drinkwitz and Strickland might go into hiding because he won't be safe. Right, if it's drink. I mean, that's the overriding sentiment here.
My favorite is the high top prof where it says it's wild how Ole Miss went from Florida is not at our level to he isn't leaving to we don't want him, he's toxic to you must make a decision by Friday to welcome John Sumrall. That was pretty good.
It has changed. It has changed. So it's silly season. Like I said, am I confident Florida gets Lane? Yes, I am. But that comes from, as I will fully admit, it is biased coverage. Obviously, I'm going to have a lot more Florida sources than I do in LSU source, national sources in the agent world. Obviously, there's a lot of good feelings out there. We'll see where it goes. I think there's reasons to be encouraged, but I'm telling, and I maybe warned is not the best word, Will, but I tried to make sure everybody did not look over that LSU was going to make a push. And I've been steadfast in that. I've told you that in text messages, basically mid last week, late last week, put it in the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord, been plenty of evidence there too. I said, LSU's going to make a push, guys. And then this is what's going to happen. Here we are. So I'm hoping it still works out for Florida. I just think there's just a lot more pieces to it now.
Well, the dust will eventually settle, and we'll be here to cover it when it does, man. It's
absolutely
never a dull moment. Never had a. I didn't realize that when you coined that moniker that it was going to mean we were going to change coaches every 3 years and have to go through this. But this one's been a little wilder than some of the previous ones, though. Obviously, based on some of the discussion about Chip Kelly, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's recency bias. So hold on to the roller coaster, folks, and hopefully we've got the coach that you want in less than a month, maybe even less than a week, and 2 years from now he won't be the coach anybody wanted anyway. If he's not winning 12 games. So,
all right, there we go, everybody. Thanks for checking it out. And like I said, there'll be some Florida Tennessee talk at some point this week. There is still some football game left to be played, but I know what everybody wants to talk about here. So that's just where the world we'll live in right now. So for Will Miles, I am David Waters right here. Everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.